So guys, today we are in the Wicked Crypto Meetup and we have a special guest for you. It's Malcolm Lerider, as I pronounce it right.
All right, thank you.
It's a member of the NEO community and he came to Poland especially from the headquarters of NEO in Shanghai. So great to have you here. And I would like to ask you, what's your role in the NEO community?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm working as Senior R&D Manager at NEO in Shanghai. So I'm helping out with managing the R&D team in Shanghai, and also to manage the development community, because it's an open source project. So we have developers spread all over the world, 100 to 200 developers. And I help out to have all of them also under the same development team.
That's nice. How do you describe NEO as a project? Because I've seen some of your lecture previously and you told that NEO is not an altcoin, not a cryptocurrency, not even a DApp platform. How would you describe it in a simple
So
words?
we like to describe NEO as a smart economy, but that may be a little bit difficult for people to understand what we actually mean with that. So the media has given us a name as the Chinese Ethereum, which we as a team don't really like, but it's a good way to understand what NEO does. So everything you can develop on Ethereum, you can develop on NEO as well, but much better, of course. And but our difference kind of stops there. So what we want to do is to build the link between the real economy and the digital economy. So we see that we have like a gap right now, that the digital economy and the real world economy, they're like two different worlds, and that's not what we want to do. Our platform is built to be worked together with the real economy to make it more efficient, and that also includes to be regulatory compliant, which is quite specific for NEO.
Yeah, so NEO is from China, yeah? You've also been called the Ethereum of China. How do you agree with this thesis or hypothesis?
Yes, so as I said, we at the NEO team doesn't really like that comparison, because our vision is very different. But I can also understand that it is an easy way to understand what you can do with NEO, because there are so many tokens out there, there are so many blockchain platforms, and they all do different things. So if you know what most people know what you can do with Ethereum, you can build decentralized applications on top of NEO. So everything you can do on Ethereum, you can do on NEO as well, and that's where I think the name came from. And the project is started in China, so I think that's the origin of that word.
Absolutely. How do you find or explain the consensus mechanism in NEO? How is it different from the Ethereum or like Bitcoin consensus mechanism? How would you explain it?
It's very different. So NEO has developed its own consensus algorithm. It's called the GBFT. And the specifics of that algorithm is that for example, when you send a token from one wallet to another, or maybe from one exchange to another exchange, you have to wait 15 confirmations or 30 confirmations before that token is actually received at the other end. And with NEO's consensus algorithm, it's you don't have to wait for confirmation, because the reason you have to wait for confirmation is that with each confirmation, you have higher probability of being on the longest chain. So that's like how proof of work and proof of stake works. Whereas in NEO, with the DBFT, at any single point in the blockchain, there is always only one block being proposed at any single time.
Yeah, it makes things quicker.
It makes things quicker, and it gives finality to the system. So in every block that is confirmed has 100% finality. It means that you don't have to wait for any confirmations. Once you have reached, you have to wait for the first confirmation. But after you have the first confirmation, then it's 100% final. So you can actually have this series of smart contracts, and you have this reduced risk. If you're doing a large volume or large value transactions, then you know that for 100% after the first confirmation, it is complete.
I'm not afraid of being centralized, because there are some the consequences of running this delegated. It was Byzantine. Let me remind. How was the
delegated Byzantine fault tolerance?
Yeah.
Yes.
How do you find it? Is it possible to run in the decentralized manner, or only in the few nodes that are running the whole structure? How do you find it?
It's very much possible to run it in a decentralized manner. So you have two parts of decentralization. One is in terms of location, and the other one is in terms of ownership. And what we have now is decentralization in terms of ownership. So all the consensus nodes are distributed across the world on different locations. But at the current moment, they are all managed by the NEO Foundation. So that's the next step. And what we are developing right now is an application form, so that anyone can register themselves as a potential nominee and get their identity approved, or not approved, just confirmed, identity confirmed. Because a requirement for a consensus node to avoid Sybil attacks is to ensure that all nominees are actually identity confirmed.
Sure.
And that's the first step. The second step is to show all the consensus nodes on a single page, so that everybody who votes, everybody who has a NEO token can vote for the consensus node. They have to be able to see who they can vote for. And that's the second step. And the third step is to implement the voting functionality in the NEO GUI. So the voting functionality is already implemented in the blockchain, in the backend. So we just have to implement it in the GUI as well. So it's
quite possible, yeah.
Sure, and it's also not that work intensive. It's gonna be implemented in reasonable time.
So it's one of your goals, yeah? The main goal is to decentralize the structure.
It's our number one priority right now. So.
Yeah, I get it. How do you find that the amount of the transactions per second that are run on the network? Because some people claim there's hundreds of thousands transactions per second on NEO network. Some people claim there's still a test net, so there's 1,000 transactions per second. What's the exact number? Do you know maybe?
In the current implementation, it's 1,000 transactions per second.
Yeah.
And we are confident to be able to push it to 10,000 transactions per second with peer-to-peer network improvements. Next to this, we are also developing what we call the Hyper VM, and that's an improved, more modularized C++ implementation of our virtual machine. And that is part of our plan of reaching 100,000 transactions per second before 2020. That's when we talk about transaction speed, we only talk about the main chain itself without any second layer scaling. So with second layer scaling, you may have heard about RAID and Lightning Network and other technologies. These technologies behind these projects are also applicable to NEO. So you can scale it even more with applying.
So we also think about Lightning Network, about the second layer solution, yes? The
similar technologies, yes. And you can also see it as, it's also possible to run side chains. So we have the NEO-X cross-chain protocol, which is under development right now.
Yeah.
So any blockchain that is using the NEO VM, NEO virtual machine, can communicate with another blockchain using the NEO VM. So you can have a chain of chains. Even without any second layer solutions, if you have a chain of chains of 10 chains, then you have 10 times 100,000 if you like. So
sounds great.
So it's there is a lot of talk right now about the scaling problem with blockchain technologies, and it's not something that we see as a problem anyway, because we have the solution
around the whole blockchain ecosystem. It's a top majority problem right now to be solved. So being scalable and the other improving the amount of transactions per second, it's absolutely the first step.
Right, and for us it's already solved more or less. So that's why I also think that NEO has quite a lot of technical advantages.
Perfect. How do you find it? Because still more programmers choose Ethereum over NEO to build the apps. What's the base of the problem here?
My impression is that it's about knowledge, actually, because before I came here to Poland, I was in South America, in Santiago in Chile, and also in Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo in Brazil. And what we see is that when we meet with blockchain platforms there, they choose Ethereum because they only know about Ethereum. They don't know about any other blockchain platform. And these are technical people as well. So when we tell them about Neo, for example, and the advantages we have with transaction speed, finality, smart program language, you can, for example, write smart contracts in C#, Python, Java, JavaScript, Go, even, so any programming language. What we get is like a very surprised reaction and say, well, this is actually what we need, because we see that we have these restriction or limitations with Ethereum. Why didn't you tell me about this earlier? So I think the main reason is actually just knowing that we are out there. And it's also quite exciting to see when there are projects from, for example, Ethereum, that realize that, hey, currently there's no way for us to achieve what we want to achieve on Ethereum's public chain, and we want to switch to Neo. What do we need to do in order to make the token swap? So that's.
So the Neo community should increase in power, and there will be more developers.
I think, yeah, sure.
Every year. Yeah?
I mean, the thing that's special about the Neo community, for good and bad, is that it's very developer focused. So it's always technology before marketing, and it has always been technology before marketing.
Absolutely.
So now we have what we see as a good technology.
Quality, rather than the amount of the programs and everything. So rather firstly quality before everything.
Right, and as I say, it's for good and bad. The good thing is that we have a very solid development community, and the downside is, of course, what you mentioned here, that we are not that well known that some other platforms are, and that's maybe where we need to focus a little bit more on.
Yeah, that's perfect. So what's your plans for development of Neo? What's the current plans for this year exactly? Could you share it with us?
Yes, so the decentralization is of course the top priority, and beside that we are also working on the Hyper VM, so a new modular implementation of the Neo VM. And me personally, I also have a few plans, and that's first I'm gonna have vacation. so I'm gonna have a well-earned vacation in June.
Could deserve.
And then my next goal is, we have actually a development community in Malaysia that's starting to take form, and I want to help them to build it up in Malaysia. And also the second part for me personally is India. So there are a lot of outsourcing.
Trying to take over the world.
Well,
it's impossible.
We are building the smart economy, and we are going to be the #1 blockchain. So that's our vision of what we want to achieve.
That's perfect.
And there is lack of, let's say it this way, there is a higher demand of Neo developers than there is a supply of Neo developers. So, and there have been quite a few Indian outsourcing companies that want to provide this kind of service. So that's also on my list to do when I get back from my vacation.
Is there any important event on the way for Neo, for investors or programmers they should consider to focus on when it comes to price issues and the development, the improvements? Any important event on the Neo this year?
Yeah, so I think that's more a question for Katerina, our marketing manager. I'm not that up to date. So tomorrow, at least, tomorrow I'm going to Gdansk. So I'm going to the InfoShare conference, and I'll present the Neo blockchain to a new audience, because these conferences are most often just blockchain focused. So an InfoShare is quite wide IT focus. So it's going to be interesting to see what people there think about the Neo technology. And there will be larger Neo events also this year. We have had already.
The DevCon was in February, I guess. There was quite
end of January. That was quite large. So that was a conference with 700-800 people only for Neo, 2 days. So it was quite a large one. And we have had 2 tours in Europe, and we've had 1 tour in Asia, in East Asia, and I think next on turn could be North America. Could be North America, but that's still to be scheduled.
And the most important question for our viewers, what's the price prediction for this year by December 2018?
As I said, for good and bad, for good and bad, we are very developer focused. So,
so don't really
the price itself, it's what the market sets. And I'm not a trader, so I couldn't guess what the price will be.
It doesn't depend to you, exactly. So thank you for giving me your time. I really appreciate that. I hope you luck, and I wish you deliver all these things you talk about and your Neo community.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.